Hey everybody, thank you all for joining us. My name is Phillip Agnew. I am a board member for the Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz Center. I'm an organizer, creative, and I am really honored to be moderating this discussion today with Maryum Ali, the daughter of Muhammad Ali, Ilyasah Shabazz, daughter of Malcolm X, and Marcus A. Clarke, the director of Blood Brothers, a documentary just hit Netflix maybe 2 weeks ago discussing the connection and the brotherhood between Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. Welcome, welcome. I'm looking forward to a great discussion with you all. How are y'all doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Good, good, good. Marcus, how you feeling?
Good, man. Feeling really good. I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to talking about the film, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Ilyasah, how are you today?
Yes, I'm fine. Also, I'm really happy to be here with my sister, my beautiful sister, Maryum Ali, and this dynamic brother and producer, director of this phenomenal film documentary, Marcus Clarke.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yes, high praise, and it's well deserved. I had the opportunity to watch it, and I've as an organizer, as an artist, as someone who looks up to icons of African American icons of many generations. I thought I had seen and learned almost everything there was to know about Malcolm and about Muhammad Ali separately and together. But this film really shined a light on so many things, and the footage was incredible. So the praise is well earned. I have a question for all of you all. I'll start with you, Marcus. You've directed a number of films, a number of television shows, a lot of which cover music and hip hop. And this question, once again, is for all of you all. But Marcus, why this film? Why now? Why was this an important film? Why is it important that this film in this milieu, this time now, is released and discussed?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it with what you just said, which is, there's just so much material about both of these men, about both of their legacies and what they've done independently. And unfortunately, we don't have enough kind of understanding and exploration into this relationship. I, for one, knew a lot about both men and didn't really understand the gravity of the relationship, how significant it was, really the effect that Malcolm X had on Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay at the time, and that level of influence. So it was something that was incredibly special to me. I saw it as a very rare opportunity to really get into this and bring this relationship to light and let people understand the brotherhood and what this relationship was really about. To me, it's like something that's incredibly important to understand who Muhammad Ali ends up becoming, and giving more kind of credence and more respect to Malcolm X's legacy as well, because these issues just haven't really been explored. And so the timing of it, I think, is really crucial and important. I can't really take credit for the timing of it. This project was going to happen, and I just, so to speak, was in the right place at the right time, with the right vision, with the right experience. And so, it was something that I was really passionate about. But I think, to your question, with what we've been seeing in the last couple of years, with the protests, with the George Floyd protests, with kind of the social unrest in the country, a lot of these issues that we're grappling with today, 55, 56 years later after Malcolm X's assassination, are issues that they were dealing with then, that Malcolm X was specifically trying to address then, in terms of having, a disciplined and coordinated response to the injustices we see against Black and brown people. And so, when you watch the film, one of the questions that kind of comes to mind is, how would history be different if Malcolm X weren't assassinated at 39 years old? How could we have solved some of these issues? How could we have responded to some of these issues that we're seeing today? And so I think all those questions arise when you look back at the legacy of Malcolm X and the legacy of Muhammad Ali.
So thank you for that, Marcus. This relationship, Maryum, is the nexus for the film. But it's very rare, I think, that we see even today a connection between two icons that was as strong, right? And two men who are learning so much about and from each other during a time of such social upheaval. And as Marcus said, we're in a time now where athletes are speaking out, where everybody thinks believes rightfully so that it is their duty to speak out. Why was this relationship so important to your father, of the many ones that he had? What was the lasting, enduring effect?
say the last, got caught everything you said except for the very last sentence.
Sure. What was that lasting, enduring effect for your father? Why was this relationship one that needed to be highlighted, needs to be talked about even today?
You know, you can't teach role modeling. You can learn and be educated about ideology, theology, but to have a role model like Malcolm X for my father, he allowed him to witness how to do it, how to confront, correct misinformation, how to use that media platform. And he modeled after Malcolm X. So it was very important for him because after meeting him, that's when he began to refine how he used the press. And very important, there are two men who are famous, so we were able to see them together. But I think it's important for people to know a lot of the scholars we have today that are writing incredible books about these social issues. There's a lot of mentoring and collaborating right now, and I just want people to understand that, famous people, yes, it's great to see those partnerships, but it's still going on. We still have these partnerships between Black women, men and women who are doing amazing things right now. But yes, Malcolm he gave him that courage. He already had courage, but it was refined. He really knew how to use that media platform and use his championship, use his how to navigate through the boxing skills onto the press platform and make it more than just about boxing. And Malcolm encouraged him to do that.
Mm-hmm. One of the most amazing stories I heard in more recent years is a story about Malcolm asking reporters to send him the photos. He wanted to see the photos before they were printed. And it made me think, if Malcolm was alive today, how Instagram would have been. And in some ways, not in just jest, I think there are some analogies there about being clear about how you are presented, about being clear about how you are seen and making sure that it's a precision, it's a level of precision. And so we see that in both of them. Ilyasah, many people have said that Malcolm was a spiritual center. In fact, we're hearing it. He was a spiritual guide for Muhammad Ali. And so in your experience and for what you know, what did Muhammad Ali give to your father in that relationship? We hear about role modelship, we hear about mentorship. What was that like on the other end?
I think it was such a great opportunity to meet someone who was who possessed the same kind of integrity and righteousness. They were both seeking an identity with the backdrop of Jim Crow. And my father was able to fill in a lot of the dots, a lot of the questions that not only Muhammad Ali had, but people of African ancestry had with regards to identity. And, he addressed the psychological warfare that was caused due to slavery, due to miseducation, due to it being forbidden for enslaved people to learn how to read and write, losing, sense of who we are. And so I know that my father loved Muhammad Ali dearly as a brother because, he did bring his family to Muhammad Ali's camp when he was studying. And I know that my father didn't trust a lot of people, and he certainly would not have done so, especially with bringing his young girls and his wife to this place. And so they just had a beautiful relationship that they were able to form in just 3 short years of each of their lives, which was not only impactful on each of them, but it was impactful on our society then and even now.
Thank you for that. The film is about brotherhood. It's in the title of the film, and it is the prevailing theme throughout. But one thing that really, really touched me, it's touched me before, but I think it was also a thread of this film, is not just them as brothers, but them as fathers. fathers to daughters. And it is something that I don't think, that we know very intentionally this country does not invest a lot of time telling stories of Black men who are also fathers. Maybe even less so fathers to daughters. And we heard a little bit around Kobe, and we've seen some other things, but it was beautiful. It was beautiful to see, and it's always beautiful to see them in that light. Can you talk about, Maryum, can you talk about what these men were like as fathers, obviously, what your father was like as a father, and what fatherhood really represented, not just to them, but in them being people that were role models to others?
Yeah, my father would always bring in his life lessons and anticipate pitfalls that we may encounter in the world and bring those home to us. And some of my friends were really shocked at how early my father taught me things. It was almost like, he was teaching me things in elementary school that my friends weren't even getting those talks yet. And I think that's because in the Nation of Islam, knowledge of self and of the world was highly important. If you could avoid making a mistake or getting caught in a trap, a societal trap, the better it is for your child. And then being his daughter, we got death threats. There were calls coming to the house that his children would get kidnapped. So we had to have, a level of awareness that was a little more heightened, maybe back in the 60s and 70s than the average person. Now, all kids have to have it now, So he really did educate us, but he was very, everything you saw in the news or on television was him. He was the activist in the house. He was the comedian. He was a disciplinarian. He was strict with the Islamic teachings with us. So he really was sincere and the same at all times. And although I had to share the world with him, the quality time, those teachable moments and spiritual moments and prayer times with him and studying Islam with him, they really stand out. And I, although I wasn't with him most days of my life, it doesn't feel that way. So I'm very grateful that he was an excellent dad and teacher and friend. And, we would have our debates. He allowed me to debate with him. And sometimes he said, okay, you won that one. Like, when I got about maybe in my 20s, we would go at it about different things. And, but yeah, he's an excellent role model and always, never tried to act like he was perfect, always owed up to his fault, to his mistakes as a father and a husband. And as an athlete, he would talk about his mistakes, which is very, very crucial for me in my development.
Thank you for that. Ilyasah, the world knows of Malcolm, your father, as a firebrand, as a fiery speaker, as someone who inspired so many. But father is something that this documentary really added, I think, in a lot of ways to the list of accolades. How important was that? Not just to you, obviously, but to him representing himself to the world, this notion of a Black father, especially to daughters.
Well, I see a lot of photographs of my father with me, with my sisters, and I would imagine that it was important for him. Even in the dedication page of the autobiography of Malcolm X, he made sure, and I even made sure when they were going to take it out in some of the new prints, that the part that he dedicated to his wife and children remained. I look at the photographs of him and my sister Kabila. I look at the photographs of him and my sisters Atala with me, and I often wonder, what was he saying to us? But I know that he wanted to leave an image that he loved and supported his girls. And my mother, in keeping her husband's, not only his legacy, but his humanity very alive in our household, she talked about him quite often. When we did something great in school, she'd say, that daddy would be proud. She talked about her husband. And she wanted to make sure that we knew our father didn't leave us, but that we knew he loved us. And you know, she did such a great job. She made sure that we understood his humanity. My youngest sisters, the twins, I often share, you know, they never laid eyes on my father, but yet they have these really beautiful stories of who their father is. And so you would never know that my oldest sister was 6, Kabila was 4, I was 2, Gamila was just a year, was just born, and my mother was pregnant with the twins, because my mother made sure that we knew who our father was.
That's incredibly powerful. I you know, to share your fathers with the world is not an easy thing. And so to hear these stories and just to know that he was so present, even in the utterings of your mother, and in the times with you, Maryum, it is incredible. And you know, I think you all are owed a great thanks, right? Even though you had maybe a little choice in the matter, for that gift of sharing your fathers with us. Marcus, why would, as you are telling the story, you've got hours and hours of footage to pour through, and you've got many different storylines to go down. Why the pathways that you chose in this telling of the story?
Yeah, I think with this film, you know, I really wanted to be able to show a different perspective on both of these men, a different perspective on Malcolm X, a different perspective on Muhammad Ali, and similar to what you're talking about, you know, to show really their humanity and to move away from the idea of this firebrand or an incendiary leader, this intimidating kind of idea that we have of Malcolm X, and boil it down to the man, the father, the brother, the mentor, you know? And so in doing that, you know, and I think you touched on this as well, we don't really have that many stories about the friendship between Black men, between this relationship. And this is one of those stories where, you know, it's a potent 3-year relationship. And, you know, you have to ask the question, well, what if this relationship wasn't 3 years? What if it was 10 years? What if it was 20 years? Like, what would that impact be? Not only on Muhammad Ali, but on the rest of the world, on Black and brown people around the world. And so, you know, unfortunately, there's this rift that happens, there's this falling out. But during the time when they were tight, you can see in the archival material, in the photos, in the video, you know, they look incredibly happy together. There's a mutual admiration that you can see that just beams off the page when you see some of these photos. They're smiling, they're enjoying each other's company and their relationship. There's an intimacy and there's a certain camaraderie that's there, and that's beautiful. And unfortunately, we haven't seen enough of that. And yeah, there's, you know, it's rare. The photography that we have, the archival material is very rare. We had to dig really deep to find it, but it exists. And we have these moments where Malcolm X is referring to Muhammad Ali as his brother, and Cassius Clay at the time is referring to Malcolm X as his brother. And, you know, that's something that we don't typically see. And so, you know, you mentioned earlier about, you know, how would Malcolm X feel about Instagram or like some of the ideas of imagery. But, you know, I go back to the film and some of these important moments that shows that, you know, at a time when people didn't believe in Cassius Clay, when they didn't think he was going to win the fight against Sonny Liston, he was the underdog, you know, but Malcolm X was there. He believed in him. He believed he had the ability to win. And as he mentions, when you watch the film, after the fight, there's this beautifully rare clip from Malcolm X, very close-up shot of him talking about the impact of Cassius Clay winning. And he talks about the people who understand psychology, the psychological effect of seeing one's hero and what that means and the impact of that imagery. You know, Malcolm X was so far ahead of his time in terms of the way he was thinking. You know, he saw that not only could Cassius Clay, you know, be a center of pride and inspiration and motivation for Black and brown people, but he knew that there would be this psychological effect of seeing someone who looks like ourselves proclaim themselves as being the greatest. And, you know, that just shatters all the ideas of being inferior. It shatters the idea of being less than in all these different ways. And he saw that so early, ahead of, you know, understanding the impact that this imagery would have if it were to go across the world. And so we know what happens next. We know kind of the mantle that Muhammad Ali takes up, his humanitarian kind of passion to spread the word around the world and to give inspiration and motivation to people. And so, you know, there's there's the power of this relationship, that you almost wish that it could have gone longer to see what the lasting effects would have been. And people have to remember, again, Malcolm X was 17 years older than Muhammad Ali. And so there was a little bit more mentorship, more wisdom around how the world works, how the Nation of Islam works, and how to conduct yourself and carry yourself as a Black man in this country. You know, Malcolm X exuded, you know, he put forward a certain amount of fearlessness in the way he was talking and being defiant. And that was something that I believe that Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay adopted into his own repertoire. You know what I mean? It's something that he took on himself as well. And he had that kind of role model to help show him the way in which to navigate.
You know, and I want to add to that, what was really beautiful that Marcus was able to capture was, you know, finally we get to see two whole persons, right? We're not seeing one side of Malcolm, we're not seeing one side of Muhammad, but we're seeing them in their entirety and their totality. And I thought that was really quite beautiful. And even that, yes, my father was quite strategic, and he did acknowledge that Muhammad Ali had a stellar reputation, especially abroad. He was the, you know, as he said, the all-American boy, as anyone would have been regarded at that time. But that more importantly, if you look at where we were historically, we didn't know that we were African Americans, that we were descendants of Africans, that we were indigenous people. We just thought of ourselves as Negroes. And my father often said, Chinese people can go to China, French people can go to France, but Negroes can't go to Negro land. And so he understood the necessity and the importance of having this young, beautiful man who would sing, I am the greatest, I am pretty, I am beautiful, I am all these wonderful things that Black people, let alone most people, had not heard, you know, of a person of African ancestry say. And so they both understood the power that would bring by this man who was not only a person of color, a man of African descent, but he was also a Muslim. And so this gave people pride around the world. And it also introduced those who have been misinformed about indigenous first world people, you know, a great introduction. You liked him, you know, you came to love Muhammad Ali and respect Muhammad Ali and his religion and his identity.
You're hitting it out of the park, because I wanted to get there, right? The international effect of this partnership, right? And we understand that Malcolm elevated the struggle of what was, you know, now we say, some people say African Americans, to the UN, to the international stage. And he understood that we are part of an international struggle. We are the, you know, and the Black Panthers came after and talked about us being a domestic colony. And, you know, these are theories and thoughts that were put into practice and put on full display in the brilliance of Muhammad and Malcolm. Maryum, Africa, you know, the international stage. How important was that for Muhammad to be not only seen as an international figure of note, right, but a Black man who in Africa, some people say, had the fight of the century?
You know, it was very important. And at the time, you know, African Americans, we were fighting for our liberation. So were the people in Africa. They had their own liberation they were going through. And a lot of people in Africa are Muslim. So it was important because the Nation of Islam did want them to know themselves through Africa, you know, and they did at the time say original man, but research shows the first man that has ever been, or human being that's ever been discovered, is from Africa. So that connectedness in who we are was extremely important. It shows that you do have a community, you know, the proving in the long-lasting campaign over hundreds of years of Black people being inferior and proving our inferiority. It kind of, you know, it squashed that. the Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali and other people, Marcus Garvey, people before them were addressing these issues. And one of the biggest things that the powers that be do not want is for you to be connected to your source and for you to be united. And that's what Brother Malcolm was doing. He was uniting with people all over the world. And my father loved it. It was important to him, and he respected Africa and what it meant. And it was important for his legacy to be loved all over the world like that. Then it went beyond Africa. He got treated better in London than he did in America during a time where people hated him. So we're more alike than different, and the oppression and inequalities might be slightly different, but they're the same. Dr. Ibram Kendi had said, racial policies come from economic and political interest. And putting a value on race and putting us in different boxes of value, that's what colonialism was about. And how do we prove inferiority and to justify these policies that we're putting in place that create inequities? And so that connectedness with Africa and the liberation and defining who we are, it's in alignment with our godly right, our human right to be children of God and know that we're all equal to anyone else. So very, very crucial to be connected with Africa that way.
And thank you for that. Marcus, you're a storyteller, and the African tradition, you're a griot, right? You are in the tradition of those before us, right? You are a steward of these stories that people have tried to cover up, misrepresent for many generations. How does it feel? And what does it, I know it's a burden, but how does it feel to be a steward of the legacy of these two men?
Yeah, it feels incredible now that we're here, now that the film is out and the reception has been, so strong and so positive and so, just fulfilling. I wouldn't say it was a burden. I did make that mistake once before, and I was quickly corrected, actually, by Ilyasah's sister Attila, who reminded me that it was a gift and not a burden. Mm-hmm. And so throughout the whole production, I felt like that. I felt the weight of the responsibility to get the story right and to do justice by both men and their families and their legacies. I felt a responsibility to tell the story and to connect kind of the breadcrumbs of history within the story in the manner that you just described, like, paying attention to the oral storytellers, to our elders, to the people who've come before us, and to try to link these different messages from leaders like Marcus Garvey to Malcolm X's parents, to Malcolm X himself, to Muhammad Ali, and to bring all of that kind of history and information into one place in a way that's entertaining, that's really, spirited and feels riveting and has energy. And in that tradition, we tried to use music as a way to elevate the story and to kind of put some of the messaging really into the story, and so for all of history, Black people, yes, we've put our stories and our storytelling and messages, we've built those into song. Going all the way back to Negro spirituals and slave songs, we've put the messaging in the music. And so for me, not only just the storytelling through the interviews, but combining that, with music that people can relate to, that when you pair the music with the storytelling, a new meaning kind of arises and comes together through this marriage of the story and the music. And so much of that was important to me to get the message across and to really make people feel something. This is not just an informative information doc. Our film has a deep degree of soul and purpose and meaning that was really thought through when we put the story together. And so all these different elements were front of mind for me. And going along with that, is the ability for us to be critical when we need to be, and be honest, about how people might be viewing some of these decisions, about maybe some of the missteps or mistakes in some people's opinion that people might have made. But we can do that, I think, and be honest without taking away from the legacies. In fact, I think it's additive. It's in these moments where we see these men as most human. and relatable. And, to me, that's how we can get the next Malcolm X and the next Muhammad Ali is being really honest about those things, and upholding their legacies while telling their stories. And so for me, the responsibility was very important, to feeling that pressure of doing it right. And so I tried to let that guide me in making a lot of the creative decisions that went into the film,
Beautiful. So I've got two other questions here, and I want to appreciate you all for your time. Absolutely. This has been a joy of my life to be a part of the conversation. We talked a lot about misconceptions, misinformation, misunderstandings, misrepresentations about these men individually, about their families, their work, their commitments individually, and absolutely them together. Maryum, if you could, what are some of the largest or the biggest misconceptions or misrepresentations of these brothers' relationship?
Well, I think that when I look at the footage back at that time, the narrative spun on both of them. They use the word radical and rebel, and during their friendship, that narrative of the Nation of Islam is. I even actually heard someone say this recently. It kind of angered me when they were promoting a film. They said a separatist hate group, and the narrative about why they felt the way they felt in their real understanding of who they were in this country and what the country was doing to their people is never talked about. It's almost like, you kick a dog and stab it 100 times and the dog barks, and the only thing in the news is the dog bite, right? So that whole image of these men and the religion they were in at the time was a horrible misrepresentation that survives today even. I'm Malcolm converted to true Islam. My whole family did eventually in 1975. And you even still have some of the immigrant Muslim population not understanding, how the nation really was that bridge to true Islam and the great benefits of it and how it cleaned up communities. And the Black Panthers get that same rap. So I would say that narrative that's kind of interlinked with the nation is the biggest misunderstanding. And it's intentional, it's intentional. So I would think that would be it.
Well, what about you, Ilyasah?
Well, let's look at our educational textbooks that teach not just Black children, but all children, that Black history is American history, and that American history is also Hispanic, Native American, and Asian history.
Yes.
That there's no American history unless each and every voice is heard on the pages of those textbooks. And if the voluminous pogroms of Black and Brown Indigenous Americans who were here before Christopher Columbus, the massacres of Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Rosewood, Florida, and even the terrors and psychological warfare endured through slavery and Jim Crow were really taught in US history classes to be as American as the Boston Tea Party, then we would understand the necessity of reparations. And we'd also have an opportunity to provide an education curriculum that's coupled with a value system for our children that's based on truth and honesty, human compassion and love. And so, when people say, these things about the history with regards to Black people, whether they are in America or anywhere around the world, or even at the cradle of civilization in Africa, and they're negative, we all need to be better informed. And I think now is a really great opportunity to do so. And probably why many people are really surprised by this documentary and so inspired and moved by it, and very appreciative of Marcus Clarke and his team and Netflix for airing it.
Thank you for that. My last question is a semi-personal one. It's a personal edition. Right now, I'm sitting in our office for our organization, Black Men Build. It's an organization bringing Black men together to organize and transform themselves. It is on the corner of 55th and 7th Street. We are right across the street. I can see it from our window over here, from Miami Mosque, number 29, from Masjid Al-Ansar, which is right around the corner here, the Orthodox Muslim mosque, 3 minutes this way. And we are about 7 minutes from the Hampton House over here in Miami. And so my question, in as much as it's personal, is really political as well. Miami is often seen as a city of just fun and retirees, but it was a haven, and it had a very particular space in this connection between these blood brothers. Many people don't know that even Martin Luther King was here right before he went to Memphis. So Miami is not just a place for fun in the sun, it's a place that harbored and nurtured and cultivated a radical and revolutionary history. And so I'm just wondering if either one of you all have any remembrances of stories of Miami. And Marcus, I'm interested, you got a lot of footage here in Miami. I'm interested if you have any words about Miami as more than just a fun town, but a place that really, really nurtured movement and this intimate connection between these men.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a history of Miami being a hub for this kind of conversation and for building. I think times are definitely a little different today. But as you mentioned, and the film goes into this, you know, the Hampton House was so crucial and so important because it was kind of an upscale African-American hotel. And so, you know, the who's who of African-Americans at that time would come through those doors. And now it's a cultural center, almost like a museum, if you will. But there were so many important African-Americans who went in and out of the Hampton House, where they knew they could be safe, they knew they could be taken care of and treated with dignity and respect. You know, everyone from Jackie Robinson, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali. I mean, this was a place for the movers and shakers. And so I think it's important for us to have places like that, especially at that time in the 60s. But I think it's even more important today to have places like that where we can have conversation, where we can brush shoulders with each other and share our stories and share our mindsets and our personalities. You know, so much of the film is about that brotherhood. You know, when the title sequence goes away, the blood fades, but brothers is still there. You know, a lot of people, I don't know if you missed that, but that's the title of the film, Brothers. You know, no, and that's where the messaging is really targeted, you know, because as Black and brown people, and Ilyasah talks about this in the film, you know, the outside forces are really what came between these two men. It was nothing personal between them as individuals. It was these outside forces that were pushing them away from each other and really dividing this beautiful relationship. And those, you know, no one was held accountable for that. And so you have to imagine that 55, 56 years later, those same outside forces exist in terms of dividing Black and brown people. And we have to remember that, you know, when we're trying to achieve success, when we're trying to achieve something that might be a personal mission or things that are kind of greater than what's in front of us immediately, that we got to remember to zoom out and to take those things into perspective, because there's going to be forces to split us up and divide us. You know, at that time, they were getting messages that were fake letters,
Yes.
You know, fake messages, fake letters in between them to help sow these seeds of deception. Today, we have Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Today, we have a different medium in order to divide people. And so people don't know whether or not the comments are even coming from real humans, or if they're coming from an algorithm, or if they're coming from bots. And so these same ideas and these same tactics, we see them all the time, creating beefs, elevating beefs between people. And I think we're at a time where we have to kind of take control of our narrative, take control of our stories, and kind of push aside some of the differences that we see existing for the greater good of Black and brown people across the world.
Mark said it really well. It's the false narratives and the divisive phobias and tactics that are killing us. My father said, if you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches, the knife is still in my back. He said, if you pull the knife all the way out, that's not progress. The progress is healing the wound that the blow made. And so while this last year or so brought some awareness, like the toppling of the Confederate monuments, it's up to us to do more to dismantle and reform the unjust, separate sets of rules under which America operates. And, wherever we go, wherever we find ourselves in the world, we are discovering these things, and that we shouldn't be blinded by these tactics, like a holiday that celebrated Juneteenth for the first time and think we've made progress when the knife is still in our backs. We have to sit down and find the solutions and not stop until we've accomplished our goals. And that was one of the really great benefits of having Malcolm. Malcolm did not stop until he accomplished the goal that he wanted. And he internationalized the struggle for Black people worldwide. We thought we were Negroes. I remember having a friend when I went to college from Nigeria. And he told me when he was young, he thought that the Negroes in America were just American people. He didn't know that they were descendants of African people. And I've even, I used to go on the circuit really early in my life, and I would have young college students come to me and thank me for sharing my story, not quite understanding that my story was the same as their story, that wherever you found us, that we were experienced the same kind of injustice and oppression. And so Malcolm said, first, showing us that we were worthy of self-love, right? That we were worthy of all of these things that could internationalize our plight. And so he introduced a human rights agenda to the civil rights movement for the first time, so that he could take the US up on charges for first violating the human rights of African Americans.
I wish we could go ahead, please, Marcus.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to that Malcolm X's one of his real gifts and talents is not only that he was remarkably intelligent and well-read and understood kind of the way the world works, but it was really also this additional ability to take really complicated concepts around systems, right? Systems of government, systems of policing, systems of oppression, and break those down into terms that everyday people could understand. And in a context, and paint a picture so that you could really understand how you're being oppressed, what are the effects of the oppression on your psyche, on how you carry yourself, again, the psychological effects of the oppression. And, that's a real talent and gift that we don't really see today, being able to put that into context and be able to share that message with all of the oppressed people around the world. And so that was such a strong component of what he was doing, not only as like an ambassador for Black America, but being able to really take these systems that we can't really see around us and make it so that it was tangible for people to understand how the oppression affects your personality, your confidence levels, all these different things. And so what he stood for, and what Muhammad Ali stood for in so many ways, was breaking down that ceiling of all those ideas of historical oppression and inferiority, and saying, not only can we achieve great things by nature, but that you are inherently divine. And if you actually understood your history, your real history that precedes slavery, then you would understand just what untapped potential that Black and brown people have.
Sorry about that. I won't even go into what happened.
No
but
need
anyway,
to apologize.
but anyway, I just want to piggyback on what Marcus says. What I hope that so many films have been done about my father, Malcolm X, and what I hope these films will do is to build upon their activism. Activism looks different now, and just to know about these men and understand them, to me, is not enough. How do we take what they did and build upon some of those foundations? And I think what it looks like now is a lot of the inequities and oppressive states that we're in are hidden through policy. They really, really are. You know, whether we want to be civically conscious or not, or involved or not, our lives are going to be impacted by that. And, MLK was appealing to the moral issues of oppression, and he realized, it's actually a poverty thing, and yes, it's moral, but they don't care about that. And some scholars say the policymakers are not really ignorant of who we are. They apply that narrative out to the public so they can be ignorant, but the policy really is about that power. So where do we intrude in or become invasive in that campaign for those policies? And, we have to be active. We have to know just within our local government. We talk about the criminal justice system and the problems in criminal justice. Well, who are the judges that we are electing? What are their histories? I mean, I just started recently doing this in the past few years, looking up the people on the ballot and seeing what their histories are. And do they have an anti-racist history about policy change or not? Because a lot of these politicians talk one way, but the policies they support are full of racial bias. So these men, yes, they sought knowledge and they knew how to emanate and educate and correct, misinformation. What is the knowledge we need right now? And the knowledge we need right now is who is governing us. And if they're elected officials, are we involved in putting a stop to them, finding representation that is more appropriate for us? And this is not overnight. This is something we all need to be civically involved in. And I think these two men, if they were young and alive today with that same mindset, will look at the source of racial bias, the source of inequity, the source of disparities. And what is that source? So it's baked in the cake of these policies, and a lot of these policies are by elected officials, and we have to be involved. And, we have social justice organizations now that can help us along the way, Fair Fight and Equal Justice Initiative, all kind of stuff. There are lanes and for us to go down. So let's look at these men, enjoy the entertainment, enjoy the knowledge, but how do we implement activism today that impacts our people and all people, really? You have Black people and you have poor people, and a lot of these poor non-Black people don't realize they're in the boat of the Black people, right? There's divisiveness between poor people and Blacks, and we're all together. So that would be my takeaway in a practical way to people. Look at these men, my father, Malcolm X, other men of history, and how do you transport what they did to what we need to do right now in terms of equaling out the playing field and trying to, decrease this oppression and inequalities in our country.
That's right. So that all of our children would have an opportunity to know that they are worthy of love, that they are worthy of a quality education, and they're worthy to participate in mainstream society, focusing on their true joys and passions.
I think there's no better, more appropriate place to bring this conversation to a close. I think it's actually an opening. That's what this film is it is an opening for people to not only reminisce and bask in the glory of what once was, but also to chart a path for what will be. Both of these men, in their own ways, together and separately, told Black people here and around the world that our oppressors, the people that we are fighting against, are not gods. They are not ghosts. They are tangible. We can hit them. We can fight them. If we organize, we will win. And so I want to thank each and every one of you all for being here, for keeping that light and shining that light high. Marcus Clarke, the director of this incredible film, thank you. Ilyasah Shabazz, thank you, daughter of Malcolm X. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to help serve with the Shabazz Center. Maryum Ali, thank you, daughter of Muhammad Ali. Thank you all, not just for participating in the documentary, but for keeping the legacy alive through your work every single day. This has been an incredible honor. I hope you all watching have gotten what I've gotten from it, and I hope that you do as Maryum said and Ilyasah said, take this information and do something with it.